People don't want to listen. They don't want to engage. They fight back. They resist. But that's our job, too, to keep speaking up, to keep fighting for them.
People say, why are neo-Nazis coming here with swastikas and chanting things like deport every immigrant and save the white man? It's because this is the same rhetoric we're hearing in this building from my Republican colleagues.
Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, the energetic progressive face of politics in the American South. And they're taking it to the man in Tennessee over gun violence.
The two Justins, I think, are the best things to happen to Tennessee politics in years.
Nashville 2023.
Furious gun control advocates swarming the Tennessee state capitol as anticipation grows that Republicans in the state legislature could oust 3 of their Democratic colleagues for allegedly violating House rules.
We called for you all to ban assault weapons, and you respond with an assault on democracy.
Nashville's Justin Jones, his mother Indigenous Filipina, his father African American, activist, academic and community organizer. He's just turned 29 and he's on a roll.
I think people are sick and tired of a system that puts the profits of the gun industry over the lives of our children. They're sick and tired of a system where it's easier to get a gun than it is to vote. They're tired of a system where if you do get shot, we don't have health care as a human right, so they have to have exorbitant medical bills if they survive.
And how is it that even now amidst persecution on this Holy Week, after my own brother Justin Jones, Representative Jones, gets expelled from the House, is it that we still have hope?
But it would be nothing without a woman or a girl.
In Memphis, Justin Jamal Pearson, 29, a devout Christian social justice and environmental activist.
What is it like being young, black, activist, progressive, and you're in a conservative setting, and you're probably railing against some of the policies in your own party as well?
It's hard. It is really hard to be focused on solutions that are data-driven and people-centered. Yeah. But the reality is the status quo is not benefiting the majority of us, including white folk, including poor folk, including queer folk, including black folk and indigenous folks in our communities. I feel obligated to make sure that I'm elevating the causes and the concerns of people who have consistently been left out in the periphery. And in this moment in time, it is difficult.
Because there's a lot of stuff going on. So how do you prioritize?
Yeah. You do all the things.
America's premier white civil rights organization.
There's been a sense of desperation among a lot of Tennesseans that nobody pays attention to us on the national level.
Holly McCall, award-winning editor and writer, 30 years in journalism.
Americans, I think, generally get blindsided to what is going on in their home state because the national news is exciting. And in the meantime, state legislatures are passing these laws that strip people of their rights. And I think the national and international spectacle that ensued when the Republican-dominated legislature voted to expel these 2 young black lawmakers who are, as you know, from extremely eloquent. They're very, very smart, and they're very committed to their communities. Brought this attention to Tennessee that we haven't ever experienced. So I think it was great because it got more people to pay attention to our oppressive laws.
Including a lack of regulations around firearms.
Unfortunately, tonight we do begin with yet another horrific story playing out in the South, the deadly school shooting at an elementary school in Nashville.
It's ripping our communities apart.
The world is watching Tennessee.
I've grown up all my life being scared of getting shot in school.
Last year they took to the floor in the Tennessee state legislature demanding gun control in a state with virtually none, and they were joined by hundreds of demonstrators.
Can you just talk me through what happened in here that ended up with you being ejected?
Last year, a mass shooting took the lives of 3 9-year-olds and 3 adults at a private school here in Nashville. Because of our reckless gun laws. In Tennessee, it's easier to get a gun than it is to vote. You have to show an ID card to vote, but you don't have to show an ID card to get a gun.
You're kidding.
And that is the insanity of what we're experiencing. And so after this mass shooting, we saw thousands of students filling up the galleries, filling up the rotunda, saying, do something. Protect kids, not guns.
Overnight, they hit national and international news as Republicans voted to expel them and a third lawmaker from the House, claiming a violation of House rules.
And so rather than hear us and hear the demands to pass common sense gun laws like a ban on assault weapons, my colleagues here in the majority party, the Republican Party, chose to assault democracy and took the unprecedented step of expelling us.
Representative Justin Jones representing Nashville, House Resolution 65 passing. He is now considered expelled.
The crowd cheering as the under fire representatives walked out of an elevator holding hands.
What was the atmosphere like when you were expelled from the chamber that time?
The spirit of our Tennessee General Assembly is a very challenging environment. We deal a lot with racism, we deal a lot with white supremacy and its institutionalization in our state house, and people aren't kind.
That's why you're standing there, because of that temper tantrum that day, for that yearning to have attention. That's what you wanted. We're getting it now.
How many of you would want to be spoken to that way?
A lot of the rhetoric, a lot of the things that people are saying is condescending and hurtful. And at the same time, the day of our expulsion, there's over 1,000 people who've gathered to be in support, to say we've got to do something about these pressing issues of gun violence, of social issues that too far and for too long have been overlooked. And so it's sort of this dichotomy or this paradox of the people in power being mean, a spirit of evil, but then the community, the constituents whom we represent, saying like there's a better Tennessee that's possible, there's a better United States of America, there's a better world that we can envision.
I think these are young people who are being directly affected by these issues like the overweening use of guns. They're affected by that. And then to be able to look at lawmakers like Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, who are still in their 20s, they aren't old white men. These are young people that they can identify with.
Coming up next, the sacred right to carry arms and the rise of radical extremists. Gun violence is rife in the US. It's the biggest killer of young people, and it happens almost every day.
Investigators say that a student opened fire, killing 2 other students, both of them just 14 years old, and 2 teachers. The weapon was an AR-style rifle.
Take a look at what happened.
We watched when former President Trump was shot at, and leaders said, this is not America. And those of us in the South Pacific watched and went, that is America.
Right. I mean, we have a real problem in America, right? The United States of America has an unhealthy addiction to gun violence, and it is propagated and supported by extremists in the Republican Party and by corporations that are continuing to profit off of violence. This is a very uniquely American problem. It is not global. It is not happening in a whole lot of other places. It's specific to a culture that has taken our Constitution and the Second Amendment, lied about what it has said, and then created an entire culture of infatuation with firearms that says you don't have any right to restrict people's access.
I grew up in a generation that is a generation that had to do active shooter drills in schools. My mom's generation did not have to do that. And so I'm fighting because I don't want my children to have to live through these active shooter drills, which terrorize children and say, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna lock down and pretend somebody's coming to shoot your class. What second-year-old should go through that?
The Second Amendment to the US Constitution is about the right to bear arms and, in many states, to carry a holstered Glock or sling an AR-15 assault rifle over your shoulder.
What is this obsession with the Second Amendment?
I think if we're honest, the Second Amendment goes back to a history of racial terror in this country. It really applies to white vigilantes. And so America has been a nation that has, in fact, bowed down at the altar of gun violence to appease this connection to both white nationalism and patriarchy. You see, most of these mass shootings being carried out by young white men who are radicalized online, releasing manifestos saying that we are afraid that America is becoming more diverse, or we're going to do a mass shooting in South Carolina where we saw at the church there, or in Texas against immigrants. And so this is sadly who America is, but it's not who we have to be.
The neo-fascist Proud Boys featured prominently in the insurrection at the US Capitol in January 2021, and their presence is felt in Tennessee.
We're having a Nazi march here in downtown Nashville.
This past February, members of the neo-Nazi group Blood Tribe took to downtown Nashville wearing masks and carrying swastika flags.
Neo-Nazi rallies are still happening in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a surprise?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, the reality is Nazis don't need to march in Tennessee. They hold positions of power. I've been expelled from my duly elected office by people who believe more in authoritarianism than this republic.
And I told my colleagues that you are rolling out a welcome mat for these hate groups to come here, and that's why the past month we've had week after week more and more increasing escalation from these white nationalist groups going outside synagogues, attacking black children downtown, just playing their drums on the streets.
We didn't do nothing to them. We was about to go home. On our way home, we went around them. They called us bad words, and we didn't say nothing to them.
In the video, the group of neo-Nazis yell racial slurs and other hate speech at the kids.
In the last year, we've had, 4 or 5 demonstrations. The Patriot Front, which was very active in the Charlottesville. We had the Goyim Defense League. There was a Nazi group called the Tennessee Active Club that became involved in a small-town mayor's race, threatening to kill residents, threatening to beat journalists. We've seen an uptick in that activity over the last few years. I think it's certainly tied to Donald Trump's rhetoric.
I mean, each day we come into the Capitol and we are told...
Jones claims that rhetoric emboldens his colleagues too.
So it is such a high level of hostility by the speaker and those who he has employed to really silence voices of dissent and to really make us feel like, we should not be allowed to speak for our constituency. And so, if you get a letter from the speaker, we'll comply when the speaker sends a letter, but these rules were not voted on by this body, and so we didn't have a vote on this.
That's the clerk. To Justin, it's a pattern, part of an ongoing campaign to shut down progressive voices.
And these are our guests, so we have a right to be here.
Okay, so we definitely do have a right to be here, but it is in our policies, no filming beyond the road.
Yeah, you can leave them right there. Thank you so much. And if the speaker wants to email me, he can. Thank you. And so, I mean, this is the atmosphere.
Just another day at the office. The Tennessee State Capitol, opened in 1859, it's impressive. Until you hear the backstory.
So this is Samson Keeble. He was the first black lawmaker after the end of slavery here, after the Civil War. And we had a brief period where we had black lawmakers, but then once the KKK was founded, we didn't have any for decades. They would, lynch black people in our state. They would burn down houses where people lived if they registered to vote. It was really campaigns of terror.
When Justin Jones walked into this room for the first time as a state representative, he was given some advice.
I was told to cut my hair. I was told to spend my first year silent, that, I don't look professional. But I said, this is what a lawmaker looks like, that I'm black, indigenous, and Filipino, and I represent a new generation, particularly in the South, where when you walk into this building, we have statues honoring white supremacist hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan, honoring a man who committed genocide against our indigenous community. This building that we're in is built by enslaved people.
It wasn't his first time in the chamber, though.
Before I was a lawmaker here, I was arrested 18 times. I was banned from this very building where I have an office now. And I was told that you cannot be an activist and a lawmaker, and I reject that. I said we have to be activists and lawmakers. We have to be movement lawmakers, because activism and organizing is about centering voices that are directly impacted by the issues.
3 hours from Nashville is Memphis.
Memphis, its actual definition means established and beautiful.
Oh.
Memphis is my home. Our family has been here 5 generations, at least. And it is about the people, it is about the culture, it's about the music, it's about the food. We got the best barbecue in the world.
Is that right? Yeah.
And one of the things to know about Memphis is it's built by movements. Ida B. Wells Barnett is a huge activist who helped to end lynching in our country. The sanitation worker strike, which Dr. King ultimately came here for and marched for, was in Memphis, Tennessee.
But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind.
And something Dr. King said days before he passed away was that the movement lives or dies in Memphis. I think that's still true.
What motivated the son of a preacher man to get into politics?
I listened to a sermon once by Cornel West, and he said, your role models need to be people you can touch. And I was like, well, the people that I'm most proximate to are my parents. And my parents is a preacher and a teacher, right? And so a lot of my gifts and skills and understanding of service definitely come from them.
The inequities and disparities that were seen, and he lived through them, that's why he uses his voice.
But the second thing is, I've been fortunate to be proximate to the problems that I wanted to be a part of solving. You know, it isn't good for communities to have to invest so much of their life and so much of their energy fighting for their own existence. I wish you could do other things with your time than say, you need to view me as a whole and a complete person and treat me as such to people who are in positions of power, right? Like, that's not what you want to do.
Beale Street, home of the blues. Memphis, birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. The history of violence against Black Americans is documented in the National Civil Rights Museum. It's incredibly moving. The museum is built around the Lorraine Motel where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. His death galvanized a global movement symbolized by a raised fist that demands equality and justice. But that raised fist, well, look who's using it now.
The way that Martin Luther King's his sayings, his comments have been co-opted.
That's right.
By the conservatives and the more radical conservatives.
Oh, yeah.
How do you deal with that?
You just have to tell the truth. Dr. King's words were against racism, were against militarism, was against materialism, was against white supremacy and all the forms that it took, was against economic strangulation and injustice. And the whitewashing of his words, the co-opting of his words by radical extremist conservatives is just is disgusting and diabolical. You can't say, you know, my 4 little children live in a country where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character, and then it stops.
Yeah.
And, you know, nobody mentions the beginning of the speech where he says, we've come to cash a check.
Today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
And it's not until he started to advocate for an economic justice, recognizing that economic justice is social justice and is racial justice, that he lost a lot of support in our country. And by the time he was assassinated, I believe his approval ratings were quite low nationally, because he was saying we need to do something structurally to the way the nation operates.
For all politicians, it's a delicate balancing act.
Do black politicians have to be careful not to advocate too strongly for black communities? Is there a line that hang on?
You know, I'm really glad you brought that up because it ties back into the Justins. They came in and they're ready to just call it out straight. They will put everything on the line. They are called racist by some of their white colleagues. They are treated poorly. Justin Pearson wore a dashiki into the State House chambers and was chastised. Incremental change in the trying to work with a side that won't work with you, it's getting nowhere. And so there are folks like the Justins. There's a black woman senator from Nashville named Charlene Oliver. They're ready to just blow the doors off. And I think it's completely understandable.
And building a more inclusive and positive future inspired by past movements. That's next. Despite the horrific and ongoing school shootings, despite high-profile demands for gun control by the 2 Justins and their constituents, despite all the protests, Conservative Tennessee's response this year voted for more guns, not less.
All right, a few moments ago, I told you about a newly signed law in Tennessee that now makes it legal to arm teachers in public schools in an effort to reduce shootings in schools. That makes sense, right?
What happened there?
Yeah. I mean, we saw a lot of people showing up and participating in government that hadn't ever. And I still believe that movement for justice, rooted in love, is still growing.
I was there for the announcement when President Biden announced the first Office of Gun Violence Prevention from the White House to see this as a public health emergency.
We stopped a couple of bad bills. One would have allowed someone with an AR-15 or a long rifle to go into the grocery store with you or to walk around your neighborhood. But then we did see a bill that is literally insane of allowing teachers to be armed in classrooms.
What caused their children are dying? 9-year-old children. Because the solution is not arming teachers.
In this nation, in fact, gun violence is the #1 cause of death of children. That is morally obscene.
You have Memphis, where we are now. Last year we experienced 398 homicides. It's a record of 100 more than the year before, and the majority of those were by firearms. And my classmate was one of those 398, Larry Thorne. So this is personal, in addition to being something that we need to fix politically.
And the politics of it, that's where the rubber hits the road.
And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away, so stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
This state is as polarized as the nation is. I don't really think we have many independent voters. You're black and white, right or left, and we don't see the nuances of policy and the ramifications of political rhetoric.
Justin Jones is determined to switch things up.
Tell me about South Rise and you, the new kind of movement you're starting.
My vision that I've lifted up says that the South will rise anew, a new South that is multiracial, multi-generational, that is pro-justice, anti-poverty, anti-racism, where someone like me can represent the most diverse district to say that we represent a new South that is not just rooted in racial terror and white supremacist violence, but is rooted in a vision of beloved community that centers the marginalized and centers them in conversations of policy and power. It's about centering voices like the LGBTQ community, where I brought drag queens to the House floor saying that they are part, they are worthy, they are Tennesseans, they are Americans, they deserve to be centered in their freedom of expression. It's about lifting up our immigrant community, because we all, unless you're indigenous, you came from somewhere. And so it's about centering the idea that this is a state that belongs to all of us.
Conservative think tank Heritage Foundation is also mobilising.
This 920-page document would usher in the most conservative executive branch in modern American history, if enacted. It's called Project 2025. Its pages offer new administrations a blueprint for executing a right-wing agenda.
This is not a project of just political activism, as important as that is, but of relentless spiritual warfare.
Former President Donald Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but Democrats aren't buying it.
Project 2025 is a 900-page playbook that is basically lays out, if Trump takes power, what will happen to this nation. You will see a consolidation of power within the executive branch. It's happening right here in Tennessee.
People's rights being chipped away. We've had everything from wanting to ban books. Parents can now challenge books in libraries. So we've got the book banning. We've got private school voucher, where the state would give money to individuals to pay to send their kids to private schools. I don't think that's stemming out of a real concern for education. It's basically going to resegregate schools.
So what's the plan?
And so I look for the coalition of the willing. Who's willing to stand up? Who's willing to speak up? Who's willing to testify? Who's willing to show up? And that helps us not only to just prioritize, but show the impact and the power of our movement.
I've been proud to see so many college students speaking up and demanding that we do better, and recognizing that the threats of racism and sexism and environmental injustice are connected to militarism. These are the evils that we face in this time, and we have to have a connection to all of them as we move forward toward November 2024's election.
Because we believe that justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, which is why we are so proud to have been the first state in the union to have pledged all of our delegates to Kamala D. Harris.
Given what you've been fighting against, given what you're fighting for, if Kamala Harris wins, are you confident there'll be some transformation happening?
Absolutely. If you are racist, you have a candidate. If you're sexist, you have a candidate. If you're a misogynist, you have a candidate. If you are not those things, you also have a candidate. And her name is Kamala Harris. And I'm not saying that the Biden-Harris administration has been perfect. I'm not saying that Vice President Harris is flawless. But what I do know is the future that we need is one where we have people who are empowered and people who are in power who listen to all of us.
What would it mean for Tennessee if Donald Trump is re-elected?
I don't think it's going to make things any different because we are already dominated by politicians who adore Trump.
Do you feel hopeful?
I'm still so hopeful because the people who we have their images surrounding us showed us the way. That is persistence, even through pain, that leads us to progress.
I don't ever put my faith in one person, but I put my faith in the progressive movement. Here in the South, we have a saying that a dying mule kicks the hardest. And that's why we're seeing this backlash, because the mule of white supremacy, of patriarchy, of homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, it is dying.
Before you go into battle, what's the track, what's the art, who's the artist that you listen to amp yourself up?
I love that. I probably listen to some gospel. To be honest with you. We're in the South, so we got a whole lot of gospel music. We read Psalm 27 every time before I go into the State House, because you really do. It's a spiritual battle in addition to a political one and a social one, and having that grounding is just so important. And then being able to come home to this district and to see supporters and family, it is so inspiring, and it reinvigorates me every weekend to go back into battle and keep going.